Hi everybody, welcome to Center Stage. I'm Rajiv, and today I'm very excited to have Sami Laine from Okta, Director of Product Marketing. Sami, welcome to the show.
Thanks for taking.
So I'd love to start with your background. You have a very interesting background, which we were just talking about. Tell us a little bit more about your background and your sort of passion for what you do.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit untraditional product marketer in that I came from the field.
Yeah.
So I was running sales engineering teams before, and that gave me a great appreciation for two things. One of them is like how customers actually understand what you're saying, and what do they hear, what do they don't hear, and also what are the things that they don't actually say to you, but they need.
Right.
So having had that in the background, it was very interesting to move to a different kind of a role. So I went from there to kind of that intersection between technology and sales and product, and now purely more like product marketing and evangelism.
Got it. And you've been at Okta for almost 3 years?
2.5 years coming now.
Okay. And you started as Director of Technical Marketing, and now you are Director of Product Marketing. So tell us how that transition transpired and sort of what the difference has been for you.
Yeah, we had an organization where before we had like 3 different kinds of roles. We had product marketing, technical marketing, and then product management. Okay. But we organized that into a slightly different structure where we basically took that role of technical marketing and kind of moved some of it back to product management and some of it into product marketing. Okay. So we went from like 3 different organizations into 2.
So tell us some of your responsibility as Director of Product Marketing.
Yeah, so that's interesting because we are always evolving, and as we're growing rapidly, we realized that we really lacked a role that was engaging more directly with the customers and the field. So I took on a new responsibility within that, and I'm now actually Director of Technology Strategy, which means that I'm even more of an outbound role.
Got it.
You look at the traditional product marketing, there's a component of the outbound, speaking at conferences, talking to customers. Yep. But now we're doing basically a distribution where the product marketers still do some of that, but we had so much demand and so many events. So I'm like taking on that role and coordinating that, making sure we have the right people in front of the right audience at the right time.
So what does that mean for you? Are you on the road quite a bit? Are you going to conferences a lot?
9 speaking engagement in the next 6 weeks in 7 different cities.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. That's great. That's great.
Back on the road.
I read something interesting on the website. You guys positioned very well. 12 products, 1 integration. Tell me how you came up with that messaging around sort of the Okta integration network, the Okta identity cloud. I really like the way you guys framed that.
Right. I mean, that really came organically. We invented this space essentially 10 years ago when nobody thought you could actually do identity management in the cloud. Everybody thought it was crazy, myself included back in the day. And Okta really took a leap of faith in saying the world is moving towards cloud. So they built this purely born in the cloud, for the cloud way of managing identities. And then many years ago, they started seeing that with the move to the cloud first and mobile first, you had to do identity as its independent platform. And it started being that's your only security perimeter. That's how I actually came to Okta. I always thought Okta is like an identity company, and I spent my whole career in security.
Yeah.
And about 2.5 years ago, when they approached me, I had this epiphany, realizing that the traditional perimeter is melting away. Both your users and your workloads and your data are outside of your moat. So you had to rethink on how security is actually delivered, and all these traditionally IT-centric things that Okta did, like single sign-on and lifecycle management of users, joiners, leavers, they all have important security implications. And I realized that that's the one control point left.
Interesting. So speaking of single sign-on, you guys also sort of coined the term modern SSO. Can you explain to our audience what that really means?
Yeah, the traditional way of handling like simplified login used to be that you had a silo of a product, and that product had its own identity, basically a table in the database where they stuck the username and password. Hopefully remember to actually hash and sort that. And then you had another product. Every user had multiple, identities in each product silo.
Yeah.
Then you had some semblance of like local SSO where you might then basically do a portal where you could log in once and then sign into your on-premise applications at once. But in the modern approach where you have cloud-oriented applications, it became apparent that that kind of a thing doesn't scale. So with the modern single sign-on, you can have a single login experience, single security experience, and then have access to all your applications, whether they are SaaS, delivered in the cloud, or on-premise applications, maybe legacy applications that you don't even have source code for anymore.
Got it.
Because Bob quit 7 years ago and nobody's dared to reboot the server since, right?
But it's still there.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I read an interesting stat on your website. 81% of breaches occur because of weak or stolen credentials. That's fascinating and very high percentage. So what is Okta doing to mitigate that?
That's really at the crux of it, right? I mean, everybody's always thinking about those magic, new attacks. That's what all the media is seeing. Just, a couple of days ago, we had a whole new group of attacks with their own branding and a website and a theme and all that are very serious. But if you look at the actual impact in the real world, less than 10 attacks out of thousands that led to a breach were actually due to novel technical vulnerabilities in 2016, where we looked at the data very closely. And almost 1,000 of them were directly related to compromised passwords. So people attack passwords because that's the easy target.
It's the low-hanging fruit.
And why would you do something complicated? In the cloud, the attackers no longer need to hack in. They just need to log in. All they need is your credential.
Wow.
So that's kind of like what we saw as the reason why single sign-on alone can't survive. You have to have strong security, understand the context of the user. What are they using to log in? Where are they coming from? Does it look like it's probably them or not? And then make that contextual decision on whether you allow them in, challenge them with something, or deny.
When you say, does it look like them or probably not, how do you assess that? How do you determine that?
That's really where the secret sauce is, right? It's not rocket science. A lot of companies have been doing that. I just felt like for us, we have a unique opportunity because we have so many huge customers. We see all of this traffic coming in.
Right.
And for each user, we can start creating a profile saying what they log in from. We can look at the IP address and say, were they in San Francisco, California, or New York City, or Mumbai?
Right.
And then we can say, what's their traditional pattern be? What device are they logging in from? Does it look like the same one or different
So
one?
the pattern, regularly.
Yeah, so we can create basically a behavioral pattern and then a risk score and say, what is the probability that this is an attacker or not?
Interesting. Got it. Can you describe how the product marketing division organization at Okta has changed over time? Where is it heading in terms of scaling and hiring goals?
That's a great one because we just touched on that. Since I joined 2.5 years ago, we really had like 3 organizational shifts that are pretty big, and all of them were driven kind of that need to scale. The first one was that we basically reorganized and eliminated the whole concept of technical marketing. We felt like product management owns certain functions natively. They need to be in control of things like beta programs and, of course, the definition and of the product on a technical level. And product marketing needs to understand how customers are actually solving their problems and, then understanding how to message how we solve those business problems. So it felt like the technical marketing was kind of like a role that no longer was needed as we were going towards that mid-market and enterprise customer.
Got it.
And then we further realized that having this monolithic product marketing was difficult for us. So we actually split that into 2 teams, one organized towards that workforce identity. Traditional like enterprise users, employees, contractors, partners.
And then customer identity.
Exactly. The other side where it's a completely different cycle. You're dealing with developers and product managers who are defining their own product and just plugging in identity as a layer into that. So it's completely different buyer, different messaging frameworks,
Right.
different buying cycle. Different persona, different buying cycle. So we reorganized around that. And then of course my last one where we needed somebody on the road telling this message.
Can you walk us through the existing product development process? How involved are the other teams in that process?
Yeah, every company is different, and every company has its own set of functions and dysfunctions. And no matter how successful and dynamic a startup is, there's always that like tension. And from our perspective, what we see is we actually have now product marketing and product management involved in kind of definition, and we created this whole framework in which we can operate effectively together. And it's interesting because if you look at how our product management is organized, we don't have like 1-to-1 or 1-to-2 mapping where one product marketer would have one product manager counterpart. Because the products are built essentially for all kinds of use cases. So a product manager may be in charge of like user experience, and that widget might be used for workforce use cases or customer use cases,
Right.
Or they will be embedded in purely API interactions. So in that sense, we have a pretty complex mapping. One product marketer might actually talk to 4 or 5 product managers, and other product marketers might talk to the same person. Because we are organizing the product marketing more along how we package it to the customer.
Sure.
Whereas product management is more organized around how we're building the underlying platform.
Sure.
And it's one platform, multiple SKUs, and multiple products.
So just to double click on that, how do you synthesize that information and sort of, I think of some of the challenges, how do you simplify that messaging to the customer so that it resonates and that they understand what you're trying to sell or offer as a service?
Yeah, we're very pragmatic in that it's basically if you don't have a business problem, you don't have a business. So it really goes back to the basics, understanding what is the business problem that the customers have. And that doesn't necessarily mean what is the business problem that they express.
Right.
So it means that we need to truly become embedded in our customers' business, in the market, in how they serve their customers. If you don't understand those, then we can't possibly package and explain our solution to them in an effective way.
Yeah, 100%.
So in that sense, the approach that we take there is product marketing is really focused on understanding it from that perspective, talking to a lot of customers, and then working with the product teams who are then defining the product around these. They do, of course, talk to customers as well, but they're on a little bit different level, and they're basically looking at how they then move the components, build the things, and then make it part of our platform and re-architect it so it corresponds to the future needs as well as the current needs.
Got it.
So that's why we really have this whole plan where product marketing and product management work hand in hand for any launch, any product definition. We continuously deliver capabilities, but they don't necessarily get packaged in any new way. They may be embedded in an existing product, and we have to understand very carefully on when should be something actually launched, when should it be just a change.
So name a good product that is marketed poorly, and what would you do differently?
That's a loaded question. I would say that if I take a consumer world example, one thing that's always fascinated me is Google's approach to their phone. Pixel 3 is arguably one of the best phones, if not the best phone ever made. I've always had an iPhone, so I don't really have my own horse in that race, but it's a fantastic device. But outside of the geeks and the bubble that we have here in the Bay Area, nobody's heard of it. And compared to the rest of the Android ecosystem, they sold 0 units, right? It's a rounding error. And it's fascinating. And Google is a great company. I'm sure they know what they're doing, but it would be very interesting to know why they made those decisions of not doing more broad-based, customer-based marketing on it, message it, really blow it out. Maybe there's got to be plenty of constraints that we're not privy to. But it's been fascinating because it's a outrageously good device with messaging that I don't understand.
I'm an Apple guy. I'm not familiar with the Pixel 3, so I'd have to do some research and get back to you on that. In a recent interview, you spoke about how IT delivery has transformed over the years. How do you propose one should build the next generation of the network?
I think you really shouldn't. That's kind of at the heart of the problem. It used to be that if you talk to professionals in the security space, they felt like the only security is network security. That was like the 10 years ago mindset. Today, you should really focus on building your networks if you're doing on-premise things or for your employees and your workforce, just to make sure that they have that basic connectivity, strong connectivity. But from perspective of like securing that infrastructure, I'm a big believer in going back to Google and some of the analyst community, that the approach that's now called zero trust, where you essentially say anything you build, you should build it in such a way that you assume that your internal network is just as dangerous as the internet is the right approach.
Interesting.
Build flat networks, build for speed and scale, build authentication, authorization, and security into the fabric of how you communicate, not assuming that something is trusted just because they're on the same network segment.
Got it.
So in that sense, if you look at those from like basic network architecture and how people do on-premise systems and connections, that's a good design paradigm. It also means that things like VPNs are going away. Instead of logging into VPN to be in that secure and trusted zone where nobody ever, has any attackers in there, right? That's never happened before.
Right.
And instead of that, you are really authenticating the users directly to the application, whether it's delivered in the cloud, on-premise, or in a hybrid combination of the two. And that kind of a design pattern where you basically assume that your design should be perimeter-less.
Okay.
And trust shouldn't be rooted on the network, but understanding the context and the connection and the device every time is the new paradigm of building. In the back end, it often then translates also to applications that are more complex, that are built as microservices connected to each other, as opposed to monolithic applications. So the application development paradigms have moved solidly to DevOps. Everybody has DevOps approach today, even if you're talking to our largest enterprise customers, traditional manufacturers in the Midwest. Everybody's adopting that mindset because it allows you to move faster, take smaller goals, smaller teams that then deliver value much more rapidly to your customer.
Micro versus macro.
Yeah, which is ultimately the goal. If you break these chunks of development into smaller chunks,
sure. Yeah.
You can deliver them faster.
Sure.
You can get it out to production instead of doing one monolithic massive release a year.
Right.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
So all of those are kind of moving together to that same direction. Because as soon as you do microservices, it means that your application is exposing things to each other. There's APIs that communicate. You have to secure them, scope them. And the logical approach to that goes back to that, how do you authenticate? How do you authorize? And that intersection of identity, authentication, and authorization is where both the speed is gained, but also the security lies. If you don't do it right, you're massively exposed.
Amazing stuff. You clearly are a true domain expert when it comes to this. This is fascinating. What are some of the recent product launches that you are most excited about?
From what we've done, I think that one of the most exciting one for me is really going to that model where you can do passwordless authentication.
Passwordless.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's been that, dream of the industry. And there's been many, many failed attempts to go to passwordless. But I feel like as an industry, we're now finally getting to a point where the fundamental building blocks are there.
Okay.
And FIDO Alliance is not a household name, but it will be soon in the sense that web authentication or web authn is now a standard.
Okay.
It means that you can now use security keys like the ones that Google released and that Ubico produces, can be used to strongly authenticate you, not only as a step-up authentication or a challenge, but also for the primary authentication where it is truly your full credential. Your username and password are replaced by WebAuthn.
Okay.
And that means that you can use both those security keys and the actual devices that you use directly as that authenticator with biometrics, with things like Windows Hello, Touch ID and Face ID on the iOS devices and Macs, and then Android devices with fingerprint readers. They can act natively as a strong authenticator, and that WebAuthn standard makes it possible to do that extremely securely. It is the most secure way of authenticating, and at the same time, the least friction for the end user.
Right.
So everything's not done yet. There are still gaps. Apple hasn't released support for that in the Safari browser, which remains a large gap, but that might be close this summer. We'll see. Nobody knows but Apple.
Pretty close, yeah.
But that gives me great hope in that model really, really fundamentally goes against that same principle again. You're authenticating yourself to your device, which then releases a security token that's only consumable by that website that you're connecting to.
I saw a headline today that San Francisco is banning facial recognition. Tell me, what are your thoughts about that?
I think that's an important step. There was another piece of news where there was a facial recognition pilot program in the UK, and a person who was walking by that police van with the facial recognition running covered his face. They stopped him and fined him. I find that pretty chilling.
Yeah.
I think San Francisco is onto something. If we think about authentication, for example, and biometrics, which facial recognition is one of, I'm a big believer that authentication, for any kind of customer situation or consumer situation should be between you and your device that you own. that's why things like Face ID and Touch ID are great, because it's only the secure enclave within your device that has that digest of your facial features, for example.
Right.
It's never exposed even to the operating system, let alone the vendor.
Right.
So I feel like that kind of an authentication, that's where biometrics are great, and I don't see any privacy or other issues. But that pervasive surveillance is coming, and I don't think we can stop it. By 2022, I expect all of us will have to do that just to get on an airplane. They already have pilot programs at multiple airports that are basically requiring facial recognition whether you want it or not, just to board through the boarding gate.
Wow.
So I don't have to like it,
It's just
but that seems inevitable. Yeah, and we've seen how good organizations are at keeping those things secure.
right.
Like, if you look at how securely government has been able to keep all these tools that they built, I don't have high hopes for that. So I hope that legislation catches up with the reality before it's too late.
What KPIs are used to measure the success of the product marketing team at Okta? And related to that, how do you leverage data to inform your product marketing decisions?
I think it's pretty much like any organization. You're looking at what metrics you can easily measure. There's a challenge there because it's like, why are you looking for your lost keys underneath the street light? You didn't lose them there because the light's so good here, so that's where I'm looking at it. So sometimes you're focusing on metrics that you can capture and ignoring the things that are hard. So we're trying to balance that a little bit. So some of the things will have to be activity-based, where you truly can't measure the impact. Like if you speak at a conference, how do you attribute that to a lead?
Right.
Not really very easily. Even if you have like conference attendee lists or something like that, you don't know what the impact was. So some of those things you have to just look at it and say, we're doing things that people are reacting to, and then you do a more soft measurement of that. We have the traditional KPIs, of course, where we look at the kind of content that we're delivering and the engagement and lead generation, naturally, of course. But one of the big ones for us internally is we feel like the main audience for like product marketing, the direct audience is the sales force. It's the go-to-market organization. So we put a lot of effort in building go-to-market tooling that helps them understand how our customers understand things, helps them engage with us if they see something wrong with our way, how we understand the customer. So it's an interactive dialogue with our go-to-market team, our sales SDRs. We try to go and listen in on calls, take calls.
So, is this like sales enablement, collateral, decks?
Absolutely. Yeah. And sales enablement is tied close in our organization. We're reported sales enablement and product marketing report to the same person directly.
Got it.
And they're very closely aligned because we feel like sales and sales engineering are the primary consumers of what we do. So we want to measure the engagement with that as much as possible. And seeing not only did they watch the content that we build or use the decks that we did, but actually make sure that we're using tools that allow us to see if they were used and then whether there was an impact, so we can build better stuff that actually makes a difference.
Let's shift gears, okay? So I have some fun questions just to sort of change it up a little bit and find some interesting tidbits about you, Sami. My first question, what's your superpower?
Oh, it's not sleep anymore.
Not sleep.
I used to be able to sleep. I think that my wife likes to describe it differently than I do. I think I'm very good at explaining complex technical concepts in a way that engages you and makes you think.
I can see that.
My wife calls it informing people against their will. So you'll have to take that at face value, I guess.
What do you think about work-life balance? Do you think it's possible? And if so, how do you manage that?
It wasn't, for me at least. When I was younger, I was working in Europe, and I was basically a product manager for a distributor, which meant that I was working with my dealer network and our sales teams, etc. during the day. Then I would spend the night talking to the vendors, in the North America, 10-hour time difference. And then the next day with the customers again, and then go to sleep for 12 hours. And after about 6 months to a year of that, my doctor told me that at age 26 I have an ulcer.
Oh no.
So I was like, perhaps I haven't discovered a unique life hack after all. And I had to kind of take a real step back and understand, what is it that I'm actually trying to do. So one of the things that I try to do now is simply structure my work where I can, where I do not work on weekends. And I might look at an email or do something quick, see what's going on Slack,
Right.
respond to some memes or something. But I try not to schedule any work for the weekend whenever it's possible. And I've been lucky enough that I had the kind of positions when you're in the field-facing organization, that's usually quite possible. When you're in the internal-facing organization, deadlines, sometimes, push you into the weekends. But if you talk to the customers, they're not there on the weekends either.
So if you're wired a certain way, is it actually more work to unplug like that? Like, is it? Do you find that easy to do now, or was it a bit of a challenge at first? If you're always checking in.
It was harder before.
Right.
I think it's easier now. I feel like when I go and do good work during the week, I have no problem disconnecting from it. I don't feel compelled to be like fine-tuning something at 11 p.m. I can actually disconnect fairly well, I think. Some people are wired completely differently.
Right.
But for me, I found that balance many years ago where I can actually disconnect and then find hobbies that help you do that. Like if you go ride your bike, just find a steep enough hill and a tall enough mountain, and you certainly won't be thinking about PowerPoint when you're suffering. Or if you're, same thing some people do running. I used to do a little bit running before, scuba diving, whatever it is. Find something that takes you completely out of that. I don't think I've ever thought a single thought that's related to work underwater.
Well, that's it for today. Sami, thank you for being here. Sami Laine from Okta, Director of Product Marketing. Thanks everyone for watching. I'm Rajiv from Center Stage. Until next time, peace.